Karen stole my fertilizer for her lawn. She didn't know it was tagged for scientific study. Part 1. She was proud of that lawn. Edges razor straight, turf thick as a sponge, not a single dandelion daring to show its face. You'd think she won a medal for it the way she glared at every other yard on the street, especially mine. But it wasn't just the look she loved. It was the control. And when my lawn grew better, healthier without weekly chemicals or gas-powered sprayers, she couldn't stand it. So one night, she helped herself to my fertilizer. What she didn't know was that it wasn't regular fertilizer. It was experimental, government-approved, lab-coated, and most importantly, trackable. I'm Dr. Malcolm Keyes, 42 years old, soil ecologist, university lecturer, and recent homeowner in the well-manicured suburb of Larchmont Trails. I moved here last fall, mostly because it was quiet. My daughter, Sadie, needed stability after her mother passed. I needed space to breathe, test some slow-release microbe programs, and build a backyard greenhouse. I wasn't looking for drama. But then came Karen Walsh, HOA Vice President, Committee Head, self-appointed Greenbelt Guardian. She introduced herself the day I moved in. Correction, she introduced herself in the rules. You'll want to keep your lawn in compliance. Grass length must remain under 2.5 inches. Clover is considered invasive. An ornamental mulch must be redwood or redwood blend. I blinked. That's not in the contract I signed. She smiled like a spreadsheet with teeth. The enforcement addendum is in the bylaws. Page 42. I didn't argue. Not then. I read the bylaws. They were vague, bloated, and clearly written by someone who had never heard of soil remediation or native biodiversity. So I followed the spirit of the rules, just not the letter. I planted a blend of drought-resistant tall fescue, interspersed with micro-clover and inoculated legumes. No fertilizer sprays, no harmful runoff, just deep soil work and natural compost. And a little something else, experimental, slow-release granules developed through my university lab. My lawn went from scruffy to radiant in 6 weeks. Karen noticed. At first, it was side eyes and passive-aggressive compliments. Wow, that's a lot of green for no chemicals. You must be watering illegally. I wasn't. I had moisture sensors. Then came the warnings. Your seed blend violates neighborhood cohesion standards. I checked. There was no such clause. Then came the fines. $150. Use of unauthorized turf enhancement products. I contested. Won. Twice. Then came the theft. I didn't catch her in the act, but I didn't need to, because the product she stole wasn't just fertilizer. It was lab-tagged with harmless, invisible tracer dye designed for agricultural monitoring. Under a black light, it glowed faint blue in contact with calcium-rich grass. I kept one UV lamp in the shed, just in case. The morning it started, Sadie came running inside from her walk to school. Dad, Karen's grass is glowing. What I mean it. She was out spraying, and I saw her front yard. It's got, like, a glow like under those party lights at the museum. I walked out, lamp in hand, waited until the sun tilted just right, and flicked it on. The sidewalk was normal, the curb clean, but her grass lit up like a moonlit pond. Bright, unmistakable blue veins coursing through the blades like something from a science fiction movie. And I knew. I checked my supply bin in the garage. The lock was broken. Latch snapped. 3 of my field test pouches were missing, each individually labeled with a micro-identifier registered to my research grant. This wasn't just property theft. It was federal research interference. I didn't go to her first. I went to the university ethics officer, logged the missing inventory, filed the tracking serials with the USDA registry, called my program lead. They responded quickly, and they were furious. Not just because someone had stolen tagged experimental materials, but because if anything went wrong, if there were allergic reactions, environmental damage, or contamination, it could threaten all our grant work. They authorized a site survey immediately, and I had just the yard to inspect, but Karen still had no idea. She thought she was winning. That same afternoon, She strutted across the neighborhood in her green garden gloves, handing out flyers. How I revitalize my lawn. Naturally, a message from your HOA committee inside was a picture of her glowing turf. Sadie saw the flyer and muttered, "She's literally advertising her crime." I smiled. "Good," I said. "That makes it easier." When the USDA compliance team arrived, Karen greeted them with a pitcher of cucumber water and a rehearsed smile, until they identified themselves. When they asked to test her turf under administrative review, she scoffed. "This is ridiculous. I buy local organic fertilizer from the garden center." One agent turned on the UV wand, swiped it over her front path, blue, then the grass, electric blue, pulsing under sunlight. Karen's smile collapsed like a cheap lawn chair. I watched from across the street, didn't say a word, just noted the timestamp on my phone. Because this was no longer about HOA pettiness, it was about consequences, and her lawn was glowing with guilt. Part 2. Most thefts disappear in silence, but this one left a glowing trail through the roots. Karen had always been about appearances, clean sidewalks, crisp lawns, fake rules dressed up like policy. But the day the blue glow hit her yard, like a radioactive confession, her carefully curated world began to unravel. She just didn't know how deep the soil would give way. The USDA compliance team took 6 soil samples. They were polite, professional, deadly efficient. Karen tried to dismiss the whole thing. "It's a mistake," she said. "Maybe the lawn company mixed something in without telling me." But when they asked for a receipt for said lawn company, she blinked. "Well, I pay in cash, informally." And just like that, the foundation cracked. The next day, I received a formal request from the university to attend a special hearing, a joint review between the HOA, University Ethics Board, and USDA Compliance Office. It wasn't a court, but it felt like one. They called it the soil trial. It was held in the community clubhouse, the same one Karen had once used to post passive-aggressive flyers about suspicious lawn habits. Now it was packed. Neighbors, reporters, a few quiet faculty from the agricultural sciences department, and Karen flushed, stiff-necked, sitting at the front like she still ran something. But this time, she was the one under review. First up, Dr. Hensley, the grant coordinator from the university. She laid out the stakes in plain, terrifying terms. The fertilizer Karen had stolen was part of a controlled federal research trial tied to sustainability testing in urban ecosystems. The chemical markers in the product weren't toxic but were traceable, and any unauthorized use could invalidate a year's worth of data. 3 of the stolen pouches had serial IDs. 2 had already shown up in Karen's yard. 1 hadn't been located yet. Then she turned to Karen. "You didn't just take fertilizer. You tampered with science." Karen scoffed. "I thought it was just compost. I didn't know it was whatever this is." But the USDA rep was ready. He pulled up a slide, the UV-scanned image of her lawn, dozens of bright veins running across her turf, intersecting with soil concentrations consistent with granule absorption. "It's not about what you knew, ma'am. It's about what you took and where you took it from." The crowd murmured. Then it was my turn. I stood, not angry, just clear. I showed the photos of my broken bin latch, presented the inventory log with matching serials, explained the value of the research not in dollars, but in possibility. This was a test to reduce chemical runoff, to restore native microbiomes. What you stole wasn't just mine. It belonged to the future. Karen snorted. "You think my lawn could ruin the future?" I looked at her lawn through the window, still unnaturally green, still glowing under a faint trace of the dye. "No," I said, "but you thought it could make you look better than everyone else. And that's exactly the problem." Then something unexpected happened. Michelle Torres, the HOA's only real moderator, stood up. "I've been on this board 6 years," she said, "and I've seen Karen fine a man for painting his fence cream instead of white. I've seen her threaten a widow over hummingbird feeders." Karen shifted in her seat. Michelle's voice dropped lower. "But this is different. This isn't about rules. This is about entitlement, about someone who thought the science didn't apply to them. She held up a page of the HOA bylaws. There's no rule against innovation, no clause against good soil, and no law that says she gets to decide what's natural. The room was quiet. Then someone clapped. Then another. Until the whole room thundered, not in joy, but in release. As if all the silent resistance to Karen's faux authority had finally broken through the turf. The ruling was swift. Karen was to pay full restitution for the stolen materials. Her lawn was to be dug and remediated under USDA supervision. She was barred from participating in any HOA policy decisions indefinitely, and her name would be submitted to the university's property misconduct database. Her only response, "I was just trying to make things look better." Michelle looked her dead in the eye. "Then maybe you should have looked at yourself first." That night, I sat on my porch, soil samples in hand, drone overhead running a low scan. The stars were out, and across the street, Karen's perfect lawn sat roped off, marked with flags, signs, and a warning: federal site, do not disturb. Her silence was the loudest thing in the neighborhood. Part 3. Perfection has a shelf life, especially when it's stolen. And Karen's lawn, once her pride, her weapon, her status, was now the most visibly contaminated patch of earth in all of Larchmont Trails. It didn't just glow anymore. It reeked of guilt. And soon, the truth beneath it began to rot through her entire facade. 2 days after the ruling, the remediation team arrived. 3 trucks, hazmat suits, scientific-grade soil vacuums, and diagnostic probes. They cordoned off her property like a crime scene. Because technically it was one, her once gleaming yard, boasted about in 6 HOA newsletters, was stripped layer by layer, grass peeled, topsoil lifted, roots dissected, and that's when the real damage surfaced. Underneath the vibrant veneer of turf-dead zones, spots where the unbalanced nitrogen and potassium ratios from my research mix, never meant to be dumped haphazardly, had scorched the soil. Left too long in direct sun, some granules baked into a dense, anaerobic crust. The root systems were shallow, fragile, a lie dressed in green. The scientists documented it all. Karen stood on her porch the whole time, arms crossed, lips pressed white, watching her kingdom fall apart. Neighbors passed slowly, some out of curiosity, others just quietly satisfied, because for years she'd pointed to her lawn as the example. Now it was the warning. But this wasn't just about dirt. As news spread of her deception and the federal involvement, more people started to come forward. A widow named June revealed that Karen had demanded she remove her rose bushes after her husband died, claiming they were excessive for a single resident. A Vietnamese-American couple said Karen gave them 3 warnings in 2 months for unusual landscape fixtures, a koi pond and a stone Buddha statue. And the Parkers, a young interracial couple, shared footage of Karen warning them not to bring down the tone of the block with uncontrolled natural growth. The pattern was no longer passive-aggressive. It was biased, intentional, and systemic. The HOA launched a formal review of all citations Karen had issued or influenced. 67 in total. 48 had no legal backing. Every one of those families received formal apologies and had all fines reversed. Karen, she was asked to resign from every remaining committee. Her motion to form a lawn restoration standards panel voted down 46-1. But what hurt her most wasn't the loss of control. It was the loss of credibility. Because the final step in the USDA's ruling was made public. Karen's address would be listed in an agricultural compliance alert database available to state regulators, university partners, and environmental ethics boards. In short, she could never legally claim to lead, advise, or enforce landscape policy again. Her image, once polished like her sidewalk edging, was now stained beyond repair. I didn't gloat, didn't spike the ball. Instead, I focused on the soil. Literally. Because once the remediation was done, I offered to help rebuild Karen's yard, using real science, real community-grown compost, real sustainable methods, not for her sake, but for the neighborhood's. At first, why, she didn't answer. Then she slammed her door in my face. But 2 days later, I found a note in my mailbox. If you still think the soil can be saved, I won't stop you. K, no apology, no thank you, just surrender. And that was enough. Sadie helped me lay the first layer of reclaimed compost from the university's pilot plot. We seeded native low-cut buffalo grass, added microbes and slow-hydrating peat. This time, every step was documented and shared. We called it Project Ground Truth. That fall, the lawn didn't look perfect, but it looked honest. And across the street, the Hollow's youngest residents played barefoot again, because nobody was afraid of rules written in fake ink anymore. Part 4. Change doesn't always start with protests or policy. Sometimes it starts with a shovel, with someone deciding to plant something different right where something toxic used to grow. That's how the reform began in Larchmont Trails. Not with a vote, not with a speech, but with a seed. After Karen's lawn was stripped, sampled, and rebuilt from the ground up, the neighborhood began asking a question we hadn't asked in years. Why do we have to landscape this way at all? What started as a whisper between neighbors bloomed into full-blown community conversations. Why are clover and native grass blends banned when they require less water? Why are homes fined for edible gardens in the front yard? Why is lawn color valued more than ecological health? Turns out, most of the rules were never legally ratified, just standards pushed forward by Karen and her so-called Lawn Uniformity Committee. She'd written dozens of informal guidance notices that had been mistaken for regulation. Without her influence, the HOA realized something: we'd been enforcing appearances instead of values. Michelle Torres, now HOA president, called a community forum. The clubhouse was packed. Even residents who usually skip meetings came in. People brought lawn chairs, a projector. Someone even brought lemonade and homemade cookies. We called it Replanting Larchmont. First up was the motion to rewrite the entire HOA landscape policy. This time, we started with science. I offered to consult not as a homeowner, but as a soil ecologist. With help from my university department, we drafted a landscape reform plan based on native grass integration, water smart zones, compost-friendly practices, pollinator corridor incentives. The best part, we included an opt-in biodiversity pilot program. And the moment I announced it, Sadie raised her hand from the front row. Can we include a butterfly garden at the school too? The crowd clapped. Michelle smiled. Yes, and we'll name it after whoever grows the most milkweed. We passed the new charter with 92% approval. For the first time in Larchmont Trails history, homeowners were rewarded for planting native species instead of being fined. Karen's old turf war. It became a turning point. Her lawn, the one that once glowed with theft, was now the first test plot for low-maintenance native microclover mixes. She didn't volunteer, but she didn't stop us either, and that was enough. The biggest surprise: other HOAs started calling. Word of the drone footage, the soil scandal, and the reform spread online. A few urban planning forums picked it up. Then a sustainability podcast featured Sadie and me in a special called The Science in Your Lawn: How One Kid Caught a Karen with a UV Light. After that, I started getting emails. Can you help our HOA write real soil policy? We want to test native grasses but don't know where to start. Our HOA fines us for not using synthetic fertilizer. Can we use your method? And so we launched the Neighborhood Earth Project. Just a small nonprofit at first, but with real research, real data, and a growing network of real people who cared about truth more than turf. Meanwhile, Larchmont transformed. Front yards bloomed with wildflowers. Rain barrels replaced hoses. Fences once scolded for color were now painted with murals by local kids. And not a single Karen warning flyer had been posted in 8 months. The tone had changed. The roots were deeper now. One afternoon, Sadie and I were watering the community pollinator bed when Karen walked by. She didn't say much, but she paused, looked at the milkweed, then at Sadie. I was wrong, she said. I wanted everything to match, and I didn't see what I was erasing. Sadie didn't blink. You can plant something too, if you want. Karen walked away, but the next morning, a tray of seedlings appeared on the HOA clubhouse porch. No note, just a label that read, coneflower, native, drought-tolerant, For the bees, that was the seed of reform. Not policy, not law. Invitation. Part 5. Some people think gardens are about control. Rows, borders, symmetry, clean edges. But the truth is, a real garden remembers. It remembers who tended it with care and who tried to fake the bloom. Larchmont Trails remembered. And in the end, so did Karen. A full year had passed since the day my stolen fertilizer lit up her lawn. What began as petty theft had become a spark exposing her, but also igniting change across an entire community. We didn't just rewrite the rules, we rewrote what we valued. Front yards that used to compete in silent hostility now shared tools, compost, clippings. Kids learned the names of bugs instead of stomping them. Elders taught pruning on Saturdays. Even the HOA newsletter had changed from warnings to recipes using herbs grown in shared raised beds. And the garden. It was everywhere now. Sadie's butterfly project had exploded beyond our wildest hopes. Her school plot became a full pollinator corridor between 4 homes and the local park. She'd named every monarch that passed through with a little painted flag. The community called it the Sadie Trail. But the most surprising transformation, Karen's yard. No longer laser-cut turf or lifeless green. It had color now. Movement. Life. At first, it was slow, just a few native fescue tufts that we planted during the remediation. Then she added lavender, then a trellis. Then without fanfare, she showed up at a Saturday planting. Didn't speak, just dug. One morning, I found her kneeling beside a coneflower near the clubhouse garden, gloved hands cupping the roots like something precious. I nodded. "Didn't think you'd come back," I said gently. She didn't look up. I didn't know what I was doing before. I thought control meant respect, that everything needed to be neat to be good. Silence passed between us like sunlight shifting across mulch. Then she added, "Quieter, I didn't steal that fertilizer just to boost my lawn. I stole it because I was terrified of falling behind, of not being seen." That was the first time she'd called it stealing. We didn't erase her past, but we didn't hold it over her either, because what she was building now, it was hers. Messy, wild, and true. The community planted a new mural on the HOA clubhouse wall, a timeline drawn by kids and elders alike. Left side, Karen's glowing lawn, the UV reveal, the soil trial. Middle, the forum, the new charter, the raised beds. Right side, a garden bursting beyond fences. At the top, in bold paint, growth is not perfection, it's persistence. And beside it, a coneflower, painted in Karen's shaky brushstroke. The last page of the story came one late fall afternoon. A local journalist had come to write a follow-up. "You're the guy with the glowing fertilizer." "Right," she smiled. "I guess that's me." She asked the usual, "What changed? How did we fix it? What advice would I give?" But then she asked something different. "What do you think your garden remembers now?" I looked out across the street where Karen was showing a toddler how to plant marigolds. I smiled. It remembers who listened when it hurt, who came back with seeds, not shame, and who stopped pretending to be in control, long enough to let the roots take hold. That night, Sadie and I sat under our porch light, her sketch pad in hand. "Dad, yeah, do you think Karen's garden forgave her?" I thought about it. I think it's still deciding, but it's letting her try, because some mistakes scorch the ground. But the garden remembers more than just the harm. It remembers who comes back to grow something better. And in Larchmont Trails, we did. The end.